I'm so excited to have you here. I've been excited for so long, so long. And this feels like such a full circle moment
Totally.
because I remember when was I can't remember when we
Mm.
had the call where I whined to you about I don't know if I should do worthy and I don't know if I'm good enough and I don't know and and you were like stop it.
It was pretty cut and dry. I'm like, I've got this powerful woman sitting across from me. Like, you just need to check your stuff and go do the thing.
Your exact words were can we just stop with this? Like those are your exact words. And I was like, oh. And then you said, do we have something more interesting to talk about? I was like, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So that is pretty much the nature of my coaching. I'm really I'm no BS, but with a lot of love. Like, I call myself very lovingly disruptive because I think often coaches don't necessarily say what they need to say in order to get people to move forward. And that's my job, right? So because of that conversation, you went and did the things that you needed to do. And now all these amazing humans are in this space and they're growing and changing. And that's, when we have the courage to say those things to people, things change, but it's not easy.
It's not easy. And we're going to talk a lot. Well, we're going to talk later on about courage because I know for you, you have been in a season of great courage, speaking up about maybe not the most popular thing, but I want to start by you introducing you. It's one thing for me to read, like when I read your bio, and I was like, I don't know how to introduce her because, first of all, because I know how amazing you are. So it's kind of hard to sum it up. But how would you introduce yourself, Lisa? What would you say, Lisa?
First, I would say I hate it when I have to introduce myself because I really just consider myself the same as everybody else. But if I have to, label myself, what I really consider myself is a high performance coach, but not in the masculine paradigm. It's really about, I support a lot of ambitious, driven women and men learning what it means to perform by slowing down so that they can do less and achieve more. Right? It's not about let's grind it out. It's a real performance with a softness wrapped around it. And I love, this about me, Sandra. I love big, audacious goals. I love achieving amazing things in the world. But that used to come from a place of me not feeling good enough about myself. So I was chasing achievement as a way of feeling worthy, as a way of feeling good enough. And now I just love to achieve things because it's like super cool. And we're here to live full, expanded lives. So I had a lot of work to do around unraveling my own sense of not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy enough, and softening, not pushing, embracing my feminine, which at the time I was like, why would I want feminine energy? Like, that's like weak and needy. Who wants to be that? But I really learned that feminine energy is the most powerful place I can work from. And that doesn't mean that it takes away my drive or ambition. It just puts better boundaries around it and makes sure that I am honoring, caring for myself and loving myself and really making sure that everything I do in this life is done with intention and isn't coming from a place of lack or not good enough. Now, I still have my moments, right? You can do this work for a lifetime and you're still going to have moments where you don't feel good enough and you have to not put up with your own bullshit and carry on.
This has been, for me, that's been one of the most beautiful things for me to witness in my relationship with you. And also just even before we had a relationship, just watching you from afar, is that oftentimes, especially coaches, it feels like they put themselves on a pedestal and then it's like, I walk on water and this, thou shalt do this, as if they never have problems. And one of the things that I have always so loved about you, Lisa, is how open you are about your journey, about the struggles, even as, as I introduced at the beginning, that you've been going through things and you've been very open and honest about, I am struggling. And one of the things that you also often share about, and that you recently did a Instagram post about was your story, your journey, and specifically how you got to be where you are now. Can you tell people, how did you come to this realization of, I know, like, can you boil down in a sentence your entire life, please?
Well, I was basically a hot mess my whole life, and then something happened, as we all are. Like, I believe we come to this world and we're given all these experiences. Like, I talk about it like Joey Tribbiani from Friends, if you guys remember that, when he was wearing all of Chandler's clothes. That's our lives, right? We walk around and we pick up all these stories until the universe basically knocks you over with a 2x4 and you have to face your stuff. And for me, that wake up was my husband was an addict. And I didn't know, but I knew, right? Like, I knew that there wasn't something right with the relationship, but I constantly overrode my intuition. And then, one morning I discovered that he was a cocaine addict, and I had a 6-month-old baby at the time, and like the bottom dropped out of my life. So off he went to rehab, and I was left kind of like, what just happened, and having to look at my own stuff. So at that point in time, I'd already been a coach for over a decade. I was a good coach. And all of a sudden, I remember looking at my girlfriend and saying, like, do you think I'm codependent? Like, she laughed at me. It's like, all right, then I guess I have some work to do. So, I just posted a story on Instagram. I think you commented on it. About, 10 years ago, it was my husband's 30th birthday. He was in rehab. He'd gone to rehab, and I went over there for our family visit. And I don't know what came over me, but I walked in, sat down, looked at him and said, I don't want a life with you. Picked up the baby, walked out the door, then sat in my car and cried. Like, what did I just do? But that was such a pivotal moment in our relationship and in the relationship with myself, because I released him. He realized he needed to do his own work to grow. And I realized that I needed to do my own work without any attachment to whether or not he was going to stay sober, if he was going to be in my life, because I realized that my addictions were just as bad as his. And in fact, worse, because I look at, whether it's cocaine or any drug or alcohol, you can get sober from that. But when you are caught in codependent addictions, or they're called process addictions, which are things like people pleasing, control, approval seeking, those type of like everyday things we do in life, right? Over caretaking, you have to live your life every day and interact with humans and not get into these behaviors. And you have to look at what's under the behaviors, and then you have to change the behaviors. And that's incredibly uncomfortable. If you're a chronic overdoer or people pleaser or approval seeker, stepping back and having to be in the discomfort of not making other people happy, of putting yourself first, of saying no, of surrender. Like, surrender felt like, who would want to surrender? Like, that word was even like, why would I want to surrender? I'm just going to control things. I really thought that I was the center of the universe, so to speak, that I could control everything in my life. That was really challenging for me. Boundaries. I didn't even know what a boundary was. I was the girl in the class when we were learning about boundaries. I'm like, I don't get it. Because I thought boundaries were for people who are mean, and for like women had boundaries, and I was nice and I was loving. And my identity was so wrapped up in being this kind, nice, loving human, not realizing that it was so layered with all these unhealthy behaviors that really pointed back to me not believing I was good enough or worthy. Like, I was basically spending my entire life marinating in shame. And that's what addiction is all about. So that's kind of what started my journey 10 years ago. And it's just been, I thought I was into self-development prior to that. Like I said, I was a coach, I was a good coach. And then I got my ass handed to me. And then, that growing has just continued. And I would say over the past probably 5 years, it was even more accelerated, meeting, my mentor, Jim Fortin, and going even deeper into my work. It's just, I literally don't recognize who I am today versus who I was. And that's the power of doing this work and really claiming your worthiness. It sounds like rainbows and sunshine and glitter working on your worthiness, but it's really not, because I was very attached to being like not good enough.
How do you even start? You know, and that's such a big question, but how do we even start? Because we're so conditioned. Because if you look at the world, especially like as little girls, like you said, we're brought up like, be nice, be kind, be sweet. Don't tell people that you're upset because that's not nice. And we also grow up in this world where at the same time, there's competition, right? It's like, oh, if she has, then I don't have. So how do we start to step into our own worthiness and our own power?
That's such a huge question.
I know.
You're such a great questioner. One day at a time. I think the biggest thing for me was taking an honest inventory of my life and acknowledging that I had really low self-worth and self-esteem. Like I had to first acknowledge that, because we can't change anything without awareness. So I had to admit that to myself, but then not get into the shame and the judgment that that's what I was operating from. And then I also had to acknowledge what I gained from being in that place. Right? I could always hold myself back. I could always kind of find excuses as to why I couldn't do things or why I couldn't say things, right? Like it gave me a lot of excuses in my life, because when you decide to fully stand in your power and own your, worthiness, it's so uncomfortable. Like it's so uncomfortable. You can't tell yourself those stories. You don't have those excuses. And then I bumped up against all the stories of like, well, who do you think you are? Or now you're going to say you're better than everybody else? Like it was just layer after layer after layer. And because so many of us struggle with our worthiness, when you step into being a fully empowered, confident woman, it almost feels a little bit, it's very vulnerable is what I will say. It's very vulnerable, right? I often feel misunderstood. It's just, there's a lot to it, but you just have to start putting one foot in front of the other. And it might be as simple as deciding, you know what? I'm going to look at everything that I'm going to say yes to and run it through the lens of, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to?
Let's talk about boundaries, because I think that that's a big one for many of us. Like you said, right? So many of us are afraid to set boundaries because I want to be nice, right? I don't want them to think I'm a bitch, and, oh, I don't want to upset them, or I don't want to make it uncomfortable. How do you start to set boundaries?
So I think it first starts with understanding what a boundary is. So a boundary is not about the other person. It's not about the other person. A boundary is, what do you need to feel good in your life? What do you need to thrive? What are you no longer going to tolerate in yourself and in others? And boundaries are not brick walls. They're not meant to keep people out. They're not meant to create disconnection. They're ways of saying, like, this is what helps me feel safe and happy, right? Like we have boundaries all over the world. What side of the road do you drive on? Like there's a reason, there's stoplights, and yellow means slow down, right? These are all just kind of boundaries in our life to protect us. So when it comes to boundary setting, it really comes down to taking an inventory of the different relationships in your life, including the one with yourself, and probably most importantly with the one with yourself, and really asking yourself that question: what am I tolerating? What is no longer going to be okay with me? And what do I need to give myself in order to feel better? So for instance, right now, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but social media is a little toxic these days. There's a lot of stuff going on. I want to stay informed. I don't want to stick my head completely up my butt and pretend like nothing bad is happening in the world, because there's a lot of stuff happening in the world. However, being a deeply empathetic person, I have to limit my time on social media, because otherwise I will be sobbing on the floor for humanity, right? So I have really strict boundaries around social media. I literally delete the app twice a day off my phone, which people would be like, that's crazy. It's not that hard. I go on in the morning. I give myself time to, see what's going on, do my stories, whatever I need. And then I delete the app, because if I don't delete the app, right, I'll be looking for that dopamine hit. I'll be looking for that. So that's a boundary I set for myself. And then I also make a pretty big commitment to stay off social media on the weekend, unless there's something that I feel like I need to go check. So those are personal boundaries, right? I have boundaries around my work because I am a recovered workaholic. When I close my door to my office at the end of the night, I don't walk back in it. Right? There's boundaries around my work. If I had a job where I had to go somewhere, I wouldn't stay there all day and night. Oh, just 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes. So I've got a lot of boundaries around my work hours. I have boundaries around my money, right? How I spend my money, how I manage my money, how I treat my money. And then I have boundaries, with different people in my life, right? So for instance, I had an interaction with a girlfriend not that long ago. She had sent me a message about something. I had responded. She didn't like how I responded, which is totally right. Her setting a boundary. And I came back and just said, thank you for letting me know. Here's what I need in the future for interactions. I didn't get pissed off. I didn't get, all up in my stuff about how dare she say that to me. She was setting a boundary. And I was also able to set a boundary going back, saying, okay, if that's where your boundaries are, this is also what I'm going to need for our communication moving forward so that I can feel good. Because I don't want to be walking on eggshells. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to change who I am. So let me know what you need so I know how to best respond in that moment. So we can have boundaries with other people. I mean, I've set boundaries with my mother-in-law, which was just like the boundary was I didn't respond to her text. Sometimes a boundary is saying nothing. Because she would have kept going on, and it wouldn't have mattered what I had texted back. I wouldn't have moved forward. So the boundary was just like, this conversation is over. I didn't have to say this conversation was over. I just stopped responding. Okay. I have boundaries in my relationship with my husband. So because he's in recovery, he's been in recovery for 10 years. I don't expect that he's going to want to start using again. I don't know. It's none of my business. I'm not the person for him to come to if he's feeling that itch. That's a hard boundary. He needs to go seek help with the people that can support him. It can't be me. We also have boundaries around, if he were to use again, that would be the end of the relationship. I love him dearly. I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing that dance again. There's nothing worse than being with an active addict. So that's a really hard and fast boundary in our house. So hopefully that helps you understand boundaries. It's really looking at your life and saying what isn't working. And I personally believe the best boundaries to start with are with yourself and how you're going to care about yourself. Boundaries around the language you use with yourself. Like if you're criticizing your body all the time, or you're being hard on yourself all the time, setting a boundary around that, like saying, we're not doing this anymore. I'm not going to tolerate this behavior in myself. So that's really what boundaries are. They're very healing. They're very uncomfortable when you first start setting them, especially if you're used to being nice. And if you're setting them with other people, the best advice I can give you is less is more. So don't get into justifying, because that's what most people do when they're starting to practice boundaries. Like, I'm going to set this boundary, but I can tell you all the reasons why I'm setting it, which has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with easing your own discomfort. Okay. So justifying isn't about the other person. It's easing your own discomfort. Just set the boundary. In the words of Brené Brown, I love this quote, is clarity is kindness. Be short, be specific, stop talking, right? Just stop talking. And then let them respond. And if there's more that you need to add, you can. But it's just have a clear consequence if the boundary is broken. And remember, the consequence has nothing to do with them. It's what are you going to do if somebody crosses your boundary, right? So if Macy uses, I will be leaving the relationship. That's an extreme example because, we're not there, but
yeah. Yeah. I love that, Lisa, what you said about that. I think so much of our time and effort and energy is spent trying to control other people and circumstances and everything around us. And yeah, really the only thing, and it's one of the things that I know you often talk about, is draw a circle around your feet. That's the only thing in life that you have control over. Whatever's inside there, that's the only thing you have control over. Right. Now, something you also just mentioned, as you were talking about boundaries, you talked about your boundary with money. And I know you've shared your money story. Can you share that with us about where were you what was it that led to you needing to set up boundaries for yourself when it comes to your money?
I have so many stories. We could be here for weeks, weeks. But that, when you said in the beginning that one of the things you appreciate about me is that, I share so openly. I think it's so important. I truly believe that I was giving these life experiences, and then I had to learn what it meant to be comfortable with vulnerability, to share them so that other people can grow. Because when we see ourselves in other people, it's like you can stop being hard on yourself. It just makes it easier. So before I got into the type of coaching I'm doing today, I worked with women for over a decade around helping them heal their relationship with food and their bodies. And I remember one day reading a book called Money, a Love Story by Kate Northrup. It's a really great book. Read it, and I was like, jaw on floor. Oh my God, I'm teaching women about food in their bodies, but my relationship with money is exactly the same thing that they're struggling with around their weight, right? Feast, famine, rack the debt up, pay the debt off, rack the debt up, pay the debt off, but not actually look at, well, what's causing me to run this pattern with money? So that was really what started my healing journey with money, was coming to terms with the amount of debt that I had racked up, forgiving myself for that, and really looking at what is it going to take to heal my relationship with money. I had to stop using my business as my personal piggy bank. I had to start being discerning about my spending. I had to release a lot of things. I had to take responsibility for paying my bills. Really, I had to learn to open my bills and look at them and then pay them. There were so many layers to, who I was being in relationship with my money. Like, I had a big story that I discovered that was, if I had money, it sounds so bizarre now talking about it, but I remember it was a big breakthrough for me. If I allowed myself to have money, that I wouldn't be loved. I wouldn't feel loved. And that was because, growing up, it was feeling like my parents were denying me stuff. Now, as a mom, I see that we have to say no to our children because they want everything all the time. So it was normal, right? But I felt like money was love, and I was being denied love because I didn't get the Cabbage Patch doll, because I didn't get the kids, because I didn't get the this, I didn't get the that. So what would happen in my life as an adult is I would allow money to come in, and then I would repel it just as quickly, because then my partner, my husband, could take care of me. And if he was taking care of me, I would feel loved. So I kept myself poor so I would feel loved, which sounds so crazy pants. So I had to heal that and realize it was safe for me to have my own money, and that I could be loved and be independently wealthy of my partner. So just so much around, and this, Sandra, so much around, you have to look at your relationship with yourself, money, and then the doing things, which I think a lot of people step over, right? So if you want to lose weight, you got to think about, that relationship you're having with food in your body, but you also have to do the things, right? You can't just and hope that you're going to lose weight. It's not going to happen that way. Same thing is true with your money. If you want to change your money story, I had to set up proper bank accounts. I had to, like I said, look at my spending. I had to take care of paying for my bills. So, and here we are today, and I feel like a boss money manager. I'm still learning. There's still lots to learn, but yeah.
But when you think about it, Lisa, too, if you, as little girls, we watch Disney movies and all this. And if you think about it, it's always the story is the princess waits for the prince to come and save her. And the princess will kiss toads just so she can find this prince who will come save her. All of these, the stories that we grow up with. And it's at a subconscious level. I don't think that... God bless the people at Disney. Thank you very much for all the entertainment. I love Disney movies. But I think that at a subconscious level, we have no idea what our kids are absorbing, and in turn, what we are absorbing about what that means to be a powerful woman. Because even if you think about how, in stories, the people who have money are generally the horrible people, the evil people, they're the miserable people. So all these stories that we grow up with, even unaware. But ultimately, if I'm hearing you right, Lisa, our relationship with our money, our relationship with our body, our relationship with our partners, it all ultimately at its core, at its foundation, is about our relationship with ourselves.
Correct. Correct. So I had to shoot my Disney princess. I joke about that. I had to take my Disney princess out behind the barn and shoot her. I had to, even that one of the big stories that I've been unraveling lately is that as a woman, like, who am I to be an investor? That's a man's job, right? Like, I don't know anything about stocks. So all these kind of, stories around that feminine role versus the masculine role, letting all that stuff go so I could really come home to, how do I need to think and feel about myself? Because it really, like, your life truly is a reflection of what you think and feel about yourself. As hard, like, that's such a really hard pill to swallow. I think one of the most challenging parts of self-development is recognizing that 100% responsibility. Like, some days I'm like, I don't want to be responsible. I want to go back to blaming other people for why I am the way I am or why this is happening. So to be 100% responsible for everything that is happening in your life that you want to create, it's a lot.
It is a lot. And it's a place, like you said, that a lot of people don't want to be, because when you truly recognize and realize that, oh, wow, the mess that I'm in, whatever the mess is that you're in, is your own creation. It's so much easier, right? So much more convenient to say, oh, it's my spouse's fault. It's the government's fault. It's like all the things, because it's a lot. It's overwhelming when you think about, whoa, this is all me. Like, I am fully responsible for where I'm at. It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. And it's something to be cautious of too, as you're doing this self-development work, to not get into that place of believing that you're broken and you're always going to be working on yourself. So being 100% responsible doesn't mean picking up the stick and beating the crap out of yourself because you're not there yet, or because you did this, or you didn't use that tool, or you had a meltdown one day, or it's being 100% responsible also means being responsible for being kind to yourself every single day. And especially on the days where it's hard to.
And that, like you said, that's one of the things that I love about you. It's one of the things I admire about you, is that, you're not just showing us the highlight reel, the pretty pictures, that you show us on the days when it's hard, when, things aren't working the way you wanted them to.